Well, let's shift our focus to Kenya now. The country has struck a preliminary trade agreement with China that allows 98.2% of its export goods duty-free market access. Now, this all according to the Kenyan Trade Ministry that says the two sides have been holding discussions for a full bilateral trade deal. Key products include coffee, tea and cut flowers. Now, while the deal provides an immediate boost for key agricultural products, negotiations continue towards a final comprehensive economic partnership agreement that will target 100% access. Well, let's discuss this deal further with Kevin Tadere, a China-Africa relations analyst. He joins us now via Zoom. Great to have you on the show with us, Kevin. Now, of course, Kenya had a trade deficit with Beijing of just over $4 billion in 2024. What are your thoughts on how effective zero duty access will be on reducing that gap? And certainly, what is the economic potential of this deal for Kenyan exporters?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I think this is a welcome development, particularly within the Kenya-China trade and economic cooperation domain. For long, Kenya has had China as its largest trade partner, but as you've rightfully mentioned, there has been a very huge trade deficit, which is lopsided in favor of China. However, this, I think, has been structural in nature, depending on the quality of these two economies. Because China is now the leading industrial capital of the world, and Kenya, on the other hand, is still a developing country that requires quite a bit of industrial products to advance its economy. So the good news that the two countries have at least agreed on a framework to promote more exports from Kenya to China is indeed good. You only need to look at an example, for example, the export of Kenyan avocados to China, which started in 2022. In just 1 year, the exports jumped 10 times to 4,300 tons in 2023. And that came with a lot of benefits to local farmers who had improved earnings, enhanced export diversification, because Kenyan farmers no longer relied only on the European markets. But beyond this, the country also managed to get foreign earnings, foreign exchange earnings that it then could use to do other forms of development. So I think that this opportunity allows Kenya now to aggressively push for more entry of its agricultural produce into the Chinese market. And beyond exports, it also has a lot of benefits. When agricultural produce exports increase, that means more jobs for Kenyan farmers. It means potential to revolutionize Kenya's industrial value chains that are, affected. And it also comes with enhance livelihoods transformation, for example, in terms of poverty alleviation. As you know, 70% of Kenya's population still live in rural areas, with agriculture being the backbone of the economy. But I think that said, it also means that Nairobi has to be very strategic in how it takes advantage of this opportunity, because China is a global market. It has to enhance, the quality of its exports. It must find a way of enhancing business-to-business ties between Kenyan businesses and Chinese counterparts. At the same time, it must be willing to enhance a policy framework that can facilitate effective international exchanges, including trade with China.
And that's interesting because we know Kenya is also negotiating a bilateral trade accord with the U.S. We know that it's also a huge proponent of the extension of the AGOA trade deal. And there are concerns that due to that ongoing trade friction between the U.S. and China, that deal, or rather this deal with China, might impact those talks. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think from Kenya's point of view, the economic partnership with China should not necessarily, negatively impact its relations, be they economical or otherwise, with other countries. And I think that then means that the partnership discussions with the U.S. should ideally not be largely affected by these talks with China. I believe that the two markets offer Kenya different opportunities. If you look, for example, at the Kenya-U.S. trade relations, the AGOA has primarily been very effective in facilitating export of, Kenyan apparel to the U.S. market. Otherwise, if you look at the situation with China, Kenya is largely exporting, agricultural produce to the Chinese market. So I think there is potential in both markets for Kenya, and Nairobi should be allowed to discuss business with its international partners without conditions from either partner. I think this is particularly also very important, given that we've seen a lot of unilateralism coming from the US. The US under Trump administration slapped Kenya with tariffs up to 10%, just like it did with many other countries. And as the economic partnership with the US becomes increasingly unpredictable, it means that Kenya has to diversify its partnership. And this deal with China speaks to the desire of Nairobi to ensure that it has functional international relations that can deliver for it at home.
All right. And I want to get a sense of your outlook for this Kenya-China relationship going forward, because an interesting fact that was raised is that Kenya was not on the list of the least developed nations who were initially granted that duty and quota-free access by China. What would have led to that decision? And of course, how does it sort of paint the outlook for the relationship?
Well, I think it could have been because of the fact that in 2014, Kenya's economy was rebased by the World Bank, and therefore Kenya was moved from the group of least developing countries into a lower middle income country. And that meant that Kenya's economy in terms of GDP per capita was was significantly enhanced compared to its neighboring countries, for example, in the region. And so when China, for instance, initially granted duty-free access to its market to least developed countries, for sure Kenya would not be in that list, given that its economy had been rebased and now it belongs to the lower middle income category. However, this deal that has come between Kenya and China does point to the willingness of China to consider Kenya as a strategic trade partner and, of course, a key gateway in the region. Of course, Kenya enjoys a very enviable geographical positioning. It is a transshipment hub, it's a logistics hub, and it's a veritable gateway to the rest of the African market. So I believe that China is consciously aware of this and would, include policy decisions that would enhance that kind of partnerships. I also look at, the future of Kenya-China economic and trade partnership being enhanced. This is just the beginning, as the Ministry of Trade here has indicated. They are expanding those collaboration and talks, and hopefully we are going to see more expanded access to the Chinese market for Kenyan produce.